All right. Good morning, everyone. It's such a blessing to be here with you this morning. I'm sorry, you're probably tired of seeing my face here today already, but I promise not to keep you long. A special welcome to those who are new here today, and I specifically want to welcome my colleagues from work who are here today. I've got Nicola and Charlotte and Sianda and then Intercorso as well, and what a blessing to have my colleagues here with me today. So for those who don't know, or those scared to give an introduction, I'm Candice. I'm one of the David pastor's daughter. Not this one, there's another David. I'm his daughter. And I'm also married to the drummer and the youth pastor who's not here now. But it's such a blessing. It's really such a blessing. And though I'm not in full-time ministry through birth and now marriage, ministry is simply just part of my life. It always has been and looks like it always will be, which has been an incredible blessing. But I mean, it would be nice to leave church a bit early, and it would be great to arrive like normal people. 8:45, 10:50, that would be great. Although ministry is something I'm now very much accustomed to. So when my dad asked if I could, and I put asked like in inverted commas. He doesn't ask. He politely tells you you are doing it. Okay. And if he asked if I could share, for the first time, being very comfortable with ministry, I wasn't 100% comfortable with the idea of preaching on Good Friday. And I think it's because it's Good Friday. It's the day that represents Jesus giving up his life and dying for us. It's huge. And where would I even begin to describe in words? It's actually just too big. But also it's really difficult because nobody, as Skev was saying earlier, nobody enjoys listening about someone else's pain. Nobody enjoys it. And it's not necessarily a light-hearted sermon or sharing, even though it's called Good Friday. And I feel that maybe a lot of Good Friday services in the world will try and redirect the message to make it more light-hearted, to make it more welcoming to people. But that's not the story. So I spent so much time in preparing for this, looking at what creative angle could I talk about, what kind of move could I take that's a bit different than the average Good Friday sharing. I didn't want to give the same straightforward approach. I want something that will catch people's attention. You know how us millennials are, and we want to be different. Because we've heard the story so many times. So let me find a new angle at looking at this. Yet every single time I tried to take this approach, there was nothing. Nothing. Not 1 ounce of creativity, no tagline or cool title, nothing. So then by Wednesday, I'm like, okay, Lord, we're running out of time. I need something. And then it kind of hit me, and I sat there on Wednesday evening, and I was like, okay, Lord, I'm open. I don't want a tagline. I don't want a title. What do you want? What do you want to say? And Jesus spoke so clearly to me, and he said, this is my story. It is written exactly how I wanted it to be shared. I don't want another angle. I don't want some creative plot twist. I died for you. I gave up my life for you. I took on your sin so that you didn't have to. I gave up my life for you. And the story is worthy to be shared, just as it is written, raw, unfiltered, untouched. And so I'm going to read today from Matthew. We had a nice Luke version, so I'm giving you the Matthew version today. From Matthew 27, from verse 27, and it says, Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. Hail, King of the Jews, they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. What's important to note is that it doesn't actually mention the exact times Jesus was whipped or beaten, although many believe it would have been 39 times, as per Paul's own account in 2 Corinthians 11. And now picture that, 39 times. 39 times Jesus stood and took a thick leather whip with pieces of bone and lead embedded near the ends being slashed onto his back, with his own flesh being torn apart. He did this 39 times. And this is before he even went on the cross. He could have died right there. In fact, many scientists and medical professionals believe he should have died from the blood loss alone. Yet he didn't, because that was not the plan. But he still endured that pain. He then had a crown of thorns pushed down onto his head and nails hammered into his hands and feet. If we look at Luke chapter 23, from verse 44, it says, "By this time it was about noon, and darkness fell across the whole land until 3:00. The light from the sun was gone, and suddenly the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn down the middle. Then Jesus shouted, 'Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands.'" And in other versions it says tetelestai, which means it is finished. And with those he breathed his last. When the Roman officer overseeing the execution saw what had happened, he worshipped God and said, "Surely this man was innocent." And when all the crowd that came to see the crucifixion saw what had happened, they went home in deep sorrow. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm a dietitian, but I work in a hospital, and I see pretty horrific things on a daily basis. And so I like to understand the medical understanding of certain conditions. And don't you think it's amazing that even Jesus' death has a medical explanation? Not a biblical, mysterious explanation, but a scientific, medical explanation. According to the Journal of the American Medical Association, which is one of the biggest, most prestigious journals in the world, it says that the scientific cause of death of Jesus was hypovolemic shock and exhaustion, asphyxia. And for me, that I kind of was blown away, and I found this out when I watched the movie The Case for Christ. And if you haven't watched it, it will change your life, and I encourage you to watch it. But sometimes we forget that though Jesus was fully God, he was fully human, which meant the way his heart pumped blood is the same as mine and yours. The way he breathed with his lungs in and out was the same as mine and yours. The way he felt pain was the same. The way his body functioned was physiologically the same as our own. Many believe that because he was fully God, he didn't experience pain. No, he did. Many believe that because he was fully God, that all of these things that were happening to him, he could easily get out of. And yes, he could have, but he didn't. He suffered the pain for us. And therefore, his death can actually be proven through scientific and medical reasoning. And in the journal, it says that, number one, due to the large blood loss Jesus experienced, this actually caused his heart to be unable to pump the blood through his entire body. The second thing is, due to Jesus' position on the cross, every single breath he took would have been excruciating. And I want to put this down just to show you. My voice is loud enough, don't worry. So the way that Jesus was hanging on the cross was like this. So his back was arched, hands tied, and his feet tied. So to breathe in, you have to go. And as he did this, where his back was lashed was being pulled by the wood on the cross. Just to take a breath. And then to breathe out, you have to do that again. But instead of us being relaxed when we breathe out, in fact, his chest was tight. because he was like this. So when he breathed out, he remained in this position the entire time. And I think that was just an insane picture to see, because you just think he's like this. And you can breathe normally. He couldn't even breathe normally on the cross. I can't even imagine the pain of doing that. Every breath he took for 3 hours was like that. Doesn't that blow your mind? To think that every part of this day was horrific, actually. Every single part. And I'm sorry for being so horrific in the way and gory in the way that I'm explaining this. But sometimes we like to forget. And I want to paint the picture, even just closely, of what he experienced on that day. And eventually, due to exhaustion from doing this the whole time, for 3 hours, he could no longer breathe, actually, which then resulted in lack of oxygen and eventually suffocation. That's actually why Jesus died. Not because he got tired in the sense of he chose to give himself. Yes, he did choose, but from a medical point of view, his body could no longer. His body could no longer breathe. And he took his last breath thinking they are worthy of this. That's what he was thinking. Through every single lash, through every single breath that he took, that's what he was thinking. Because I used to think Jesus died peacefully. You know? He died peacefully on the cross. What a beautiful way to die. But the harsh reality is that was not the story. He went through all of it while thinking of you and while thinking of me. He went through all of that because of us, because of our sin, and yet he had us in mind. And I don't think it really matters how many times you've heard the story. Every single time you hear it, what does it stir up in you? Because it has to stir up something. You can't be listening to a story like this and you just feel nothing. There must be something. Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel grief, pain, sadness? Whatever it may be, I want you just to think about that. What do you feel when you hear this story of what Jesus did for you over 2,000 years ago? What is the response that you have? For me, when I went through all of this again and reading through all of this again, there was one question that kept coming to mind. What is the cross worth to you? Candice, what is the cross worth to you? What does it mean to you, for you? What does it mean for your family, your friends, your colleagues, people you love who don't believe, who don't know Jesus? What does it mean? And what is it worth? And when we can start to even begin to understand the enormity of what happened on this day over 2,000 years ago, how can the cross not mean absolutely everything to you? Knowing that God gave up his son in human form, he was born. Born to die and carry the weight and shame of sin on him when he was innocent. He went through all the pain, all the suffering for you, for me. And the beautiful reason is because he simply loves you. That's the story. That's why we call this Good Friday, because it's good because he loves us. And I don't want to overcomplicate the story. I don't want to add frills and whistles to the story because the story is simple. He went through all the pain, all the suffering, every lash, every breath, everything. Even the mockery, watching people tore up his clothes and throw lots for it. Watching as people chose Barnabas over him. Forget about even the physical pain, but the emotional pain of seeing people that he was going to die for not even choose him, not even stand by him. Listening to Peter as he denied him 3 times. There was so much happening in this day. But he did all of that because he loves you. And this is the beautiful part. He believed that you were worth dying for. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you've been through. He chose you on the cross. He believed that you were worth dying for. When you were in sin, he chose you. He chose you. He knew the sin that you would commit. He knew the life you would live. He knew everything. And he chose you. And he said you are worthy to die for. And not just anyone, I will die for you. And he did. Jesus believed you were worth dying for. God said, I'm going to send my son. I'm going to give up my everything for you. I'm carrying life in me, and I couldn't even imagine, as Skev was saying earlier, giving up his own child for people who would even reject her or him. How beautiful is that? How beautiful is this story? Because this is the story. It's the greatest story that will ever be shared. That Jesus gave up everything because he loved you and because you were worthy to die for. So it doesn't matter what anyone else says about you. It doesn't matter the pain you might have caused other people. It doesn't matter what sin you've committed or what the things you've done or said. It actually doesn't matter. Because Jesus was thinking of you on the cross. And he did it with love. And if he chose you, then what does it matter about what you have done, what people have said about you? It doesn't matter. I like to believe that I live my life for Jesus, but I know for sure that I forget the cost. To remind us of the cost. But the beautiful thing is that Skev was saying earlier is that we know that through all the pain, that he was trampled on like a rose, and that he lived to die. All of this is that he could raise up again on Sunday morning, and we could say that our Jesus defeated death, that our Jesus is above all. Friday is good because Sunday is coming. So long for the hope of that Sunday brings. Look for the goodness and joy and victory that Sunday brings, but never forget the cost that he paid on Friday. And that's the story. And so I just want to call up Skev now this morning. We're going to do something a bit different now. But Skev's going to explain a bit about what we're going to do.
Wow, what a message, eh? What an absolutely profound message. Just so simple. And I think sometimes I'm definitely culpable of that. I'm preparing a sermon for Sunday, and Candice is talking my language, because we're trying to coerce people, because we've talked about the cross so much in our lives that we kind of think there has to be something else now. We need something else to catch people's attention. But this caught my attention today. This will never not catch our attention if we come to terms with it. That's where the cost comes in. That's where the cost comes in. The cost helps us keep coming to terms with the power of the cross. The moment we stop counting the cost, the moment we think the cross was yesterday's revelation, but I need a new revelation. But when we come to terms with the cost of who we are and what we need to give away, we come to terms with the amazing message of what Jesus did. A simple message, but a horrendous day. I love that. It was a horrendous day, not a beautiful, quiet, public holiday where we eat white eggs. It was a horrendous day. But it's not to just look at the horrendousness, it's to allow that horrendous sacrifice to get us over the line. It's to get us over the line, to say it's horrendous because he wants to show the power and the might of what it is for each of us. So I could go on. Okay.